Sophia used to be my world. My mornings started with her warm embrace. My nights ended with whispered dreams we swore we'd chase together. But dreams can be fragile things, and love even more so. I lost her to a man with deep pockets and a shallow soul. Adrian Whitmore, a name that carried weight in the business world, had swooped in, dazzling her with luxury, power, and promises of a life I couldn't give her at the time. She didn't hesitate. Papers were signed, vows discarded, and she walked out of my life without looking back. For a long time, I hated her. Not just for leaving, but for how easily she had moved on, as if what we had meant nothing. I spent months drowning in my own failures, wondering if I had been the problem all along. But pain has a funny way of shaping a man. Instead of wallowing, I rebuilt. I crafted success with my own hands, molded my life into something greater than I ever thought possible. Then, out of nowhere, an invitation arrived. A sleek, cream-colored envelope lay among the stack of paperwork on my desk, its golden script catching the dim light of my office. No return address, but I didn't need one. The handwriting was unmistakable, Sophia's. I hesitated before picking it up, my fingers tightening around the delicate paper as I unfolded the note inside. Adrian and I are hosting a small gathering at La Rosa. We'd love for you to join us. It's been a long time. No hard feelings. No hard feelings. I scoffed, leaning back in my chair. The audacity. She left me for a billionaire, mocked my ambitions, laughed at my struggles, and now she expected me to sit at a table with her and the man who took her away? I should have torn the invitation in half and tossed it in the trash. I should have ignored it. But I didn't. Instead, I reached for my phone, my pulse steady, my decision made. If she wanted to see me again, she would, but not as the man she left behind. I typed a response. I'd love to. Let's make it a night to remember. The moment I stepped into La Rosa, the air shifted. Soft golden light flickered from chandeliers, casting a warm glow over polished mahogany tables and crystal wine glasses. The restaurant smelled of aged whiskey, seared steak, and expensive perfume, the kind of place where wealth wasn't just displayed, it was expected. Dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, I strode through the entrance with measured confidence. Heads turned, some curious, others intrigued, but I wasn't here for them. My eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. Sophia. She sat near the center of the restaurant, a picture of effortless elegance in a crimson dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Golden waves of hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing the face I once knew intimately. And beside her? Adrian Whitmore. Arrogance personified. Clad in an expensive silk suit, he lounged back in his chair, exuding the kind of careless confidence that only came with money and power. His fingers idly drummed against a glass of Chateau Lafite, a smug smirk tugging at his lips. Sophia spotted me first. Her gaze flickered, surprise flashing across her face before she quickly masked it with a polite smile. But I saw it, the hesitation, the moment of uncertainty. Adrian, however, didn't hesitate. His smirk widened as he lifted his glass. Well, well, look who decided to show up, he drawled, voice dripping with condescension. Honestly, I wasn't sure you'd accept our invitation. Thought you'd be too occupied. Sophia chuckled softly, twirling the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. Oh, Adrian, be nice. We're here to catch up, aren't we? Catch up. As if we were old friends sharing fond memories, not ex-lovers thrown back into the same space for a twisted game of social amusement. I slid into the seat across from them, matching Adrian's stare with unwavering calm. Of course. I wouldn't miss this for the world. The waiter appeared almost instantly, presenting a leather-bound menu, but Adrian waved him off without even looking. We'll have the steak medium rare, he said dismissively. Get him whatever he can afford. Sophia covered her mouth, trying to suppress a laugh. I smiled, but not in the way they expected. Leaning back, I turned to the waiter. I'll have the A5 Wagyu medium rare. And bring me a bottle of Chateau Margaux, 2009. The waiter's eyebrow lifted slightly, impressed. Excellent choice, sir. Adrian's smirk faltered. That's an expensive order. I lifted my glass, taking my time. I know. For the first time that night, Sophia looked at me differently. Not with mockery. Not with pity. But with something else. Something she wasn't ready to admit. And I just smiled, because the night had only just begun. Laughter and conversation hummed around us, but at our table, the air was thick with unspoken words. Adrian droned on about hedge funds and market takeovers, his voice a dull hum in the background. His presence barely registered to me anymore, because Sophia's gaze kept finding mine. It wasn't intentional at first. A casual glance, a lingering moment too long, a hesitation in her breath when I spoke. But soon, it became deliberate. She remembered. I saw it in the way her fingers toyed with the stem of her wine glass, the way she shifted in her seat as if restless, the way she bit her lip, an old habit of hers when lost in thought. Adrian, ever oblivious, continued. So tell me, man, what exactly is it that you do these days? I met his smug gaze without flinching. I run a private investment firm. Small, but very successful. Focused on smart acquisitions, long-term returns. Adrian chuckled, swirling his wine. Oh? And what kind of returns are we talking about? I leaned forward slightly, voice smooth. Enough to afford this dinner without checking my account balance. His smirk flickered. Sophia let out a breathy laugh, quickly covering her mouth, but the damage was done. Adrian shot her a sideways glance, and I caught the slight stiffening in her posture. She had laughed without thinking, a reflex, an instinct. Old habits don't die easily. I tilted my glass toward her. You always did have good taste in wine, Sophia. Do you still prefer reds over whites? Her tongue darted out to wet her lips, a flicker of nostalgia crossing her face. Yes. I do. Adrian frowned. I thought you liked whites. She hesitated. I used to. But. She trailed off, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. But it was never her choice. I saw the realization dawn in her eyes. How much of herself had she changed to fit his world? Adrian's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at the screen, sighed, then stood. Damn, I need to take this. Business never stops, you know? He clapped me on the shoulder. Too hard, too performative, before stepping away. The moment he disappeared, the atmosphere shifted. Sophia exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. He talks too much, she muttered, rolling her eyes. I smirked. He's charming in his own way. She scoffed, swirling her wine. You never liked him. I leaned in slightly. Neither did you. Her fingers tightened around the glass. A flicker of guilt crossed her features, but it was quickly replaced by something else, something she couldn't quite hide. You've changed, she said, her voice softer now. So have you, I murmured. A charged silence stretched between us. The sounds of clinking silverware, murmured conversations, and soft jazz music faded into the background. Then, under the table, her foot brushed against mine. Light, tentative, deliberate. She froze. So did I. She hadn't meant to, or maybe she had. But in that instant, the world tilted, the past bleeding into the present, desire crackling in the space between us. She pulled back, quickly averting her gaze. But the damage was done. I smirked, tilting my head. She was playing a dangerous game, and I was more than willing to play along. The air between us was charged, silent yet deafening, thick with tension neither of us acknowledged aloud. Sophia kept her gaze lowered, her fingers absently tracing the condensation on her wine glass, but I saw the slight tremble in her hands. Underneath the table, her foot had barely touched mine, a fleeting, hesitant connection, but in that small moment something shifted. She was remembering, and so was I. Adrian was still on his call, pacing near the entrance, his voice sharp as he discussed numbers and profit. He was too preoccupied to notice the way his wife sat a little too still, the way her breath had quickened, the way her thighs pressed together beneath the table. Tell me something, Sophia, I murmured, my voice slow, deliberate. Her eyes flickered up, wary but curious. What? Are you happy? She flinched just barely. It was so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. A flicker of defiance crossed her features. Of course I am. I smirked, lifting my glass. Liar. She inhaled sharply. Excuse me. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, my voice dropping into something deeper, more intimate. You used to laugh without thinking. You used to argue about wine, dance in the kitchen, sneak kisses in public just because you couldn't help yourself. My gaze dropped briefly to her parted lips before meeting her eyes again. That woman wouldn't be sitting here, silent, afraid to move. Her chest rose and fell in a slow, uneven breath. You don't know me anymore. I smiled. Don't I? She swallowed hard. Her fingers tightened around her glass, and for the first time that night, she looked at me with something raw, something unguarded. You have no idea what my life is like now, she whispered. I tilted my head. Then tell me. For a moment, just a moment, she looked like she might. Like she wanted to. But then, Adrian's voice cut through the air. That's settled. Sorry about that, babe. The mask snapped back into place. Sophia straightened, her posture perfect, her face smooth and unreadable once again. Adrian slid back into his seat, oblivious to the storm that had just passed between us. What did I miss? Sophia took a long sip of her wine. Nothing important. But the way she refused to meet my gaze told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't over. Not even close. The meal continued, but the taste of expensive wine and perfectly cooked steak barely registered. Sophia's presence consumed me. Every stolen glance, every shift of her body, every hesitant brush of her fingers against the rim of her glass, it all spoke a language Adrian was too blind to notice. He droned on about his latest business ventures, oblivious to the way his wife sat stiffly beside him, as if trying to suppress the heat curling in her veins. I watched her struggle, and I enjoyed it. And that's why investing in offshore markets right now is a game-changer, Adrian concluded, leaning back with a self-satisfied smirk. Of course, that's probably beyond your league. I chuckled, slow and deliberate. Oh, I'm sure you'd be surprised what I have access to these days. Sophia's lips parted slightly. She knew. She could see it now. The confidence, the control, the power Adrian thought only he possessed. And it made her breath hitch. Adrian waved a hand. Anyway, enough business talk. Sophia, baby, why don't you tell him about the new penthouse we just bought? She blinked, as if yanked from a trance. Oh, yes. It has a view of the skyline, a private rooftop, all the luxuries you could imagine. Her voice sounded distant, rehearsed. Like she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. I tilted my head. Sounds breathtaking. She swallowed hard. Adrian took another sip of his wine, checking his watch. Damn. I need to make another call. This one's international. You two don't mind, do you? I smirked. Not at all. He grinned. Good man. Then, with an effortless arrogance, he stood and disappeared toward the private lounge area. The moment he was gone, the air cracked with unspoken tension. Sophia exhaled, pressing her hands to her lap as if trying to steady herself. You're doing that thing again, I murmured. Her gaze snapped to mine. What thing? Pressing your thighs together under the table when you don't want to admit what you're feeling. Her breath hitched. I don't know what you're talking about. I leaned in, my voice a whisper. Liar. She inhaled sharply, her pupils dilating. Stop. Stop what? She shifted, gripping the table's edge as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Looking at me like that. Like you know me. I smirked. But I do, Sophia. I know how your breath catches when you're craving something you shouldn't. I know how your body betrays you before your mind can stop it. My eyes trailed slowly over her, her parted lips, her trembling fingers, the way her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. And right now? You're burning. Her lashes fluttered, her tongue darting out to wet her lips. This is wrong, she whispered. I leaned closer, just enough for her to feel my breath against her skin. Then why aren't you moving away? She didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. She didn't want to. The weight of temptation pressed between us, thick and inescapable. The restaurant bustled around us, laughter and conversation filling the space, yet it felt as if we were trapped in our own world, one charged with a forbidden longing neither of us dared to name. Sophia's breaths came shallow, her hands gripping the edge of the table, her nails digging into the wood as if grounding herself. But it wasn't working. Not when her body was already betraying her. Not when her lips had parted slightly, her chest rising and falling too quickly. Not when she was leaning in, just enough to feel my presence but not enough to cross that invisible line she was still desperately trying to hold on to. I should go, she whispered. But she didn't move. I smirked. Then go. She swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. I can't. Why not? I asked, my voice smooth, laced with the kind of patience that only made the anticipation sharper. Her gaze flickered, her fingers tightening into fists against her lap. Because. She exhaled sharply. Because I don't want to. That was all I needed to hear. I reached forward slowly, my fingertips grazing the inside of her wrist, a feather-light touch, but it sent a visible shiver up her arm. Her pulse hammered beneath my touch, betraying the war raging inside her. You used to be so sure of yourself, I murmured. Where did that woman go? Her breath hitched. She had to grow up. I tilted my head. Or she let someone else tell her who to be. She closed her eyes for a second, as if absorbing the truth in my words. When she opened them again, there was something different, a flicker of something dangerous. Something reckless. The moment snapped. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floors. My eyes followed her every movement as she grabbed her clutch, her fingers trembling. Meet me outside, she whispered. Then she turned and walked away, her hips swaying ever so slightly, her body humming with barely restrained desire. I let out a slow, knowing smile. She had already decided. I finished my drink in one slow sip before standing, adjusting my suit jacket and heading toward the exit. The night was far from over.